Hello, this is my August wrap up. So this video is about a week later than usual and my voice is super messed up, and that is because my family finally succumbed to COVID and I am still getting over it a little bit. So I'm sorry you had no video last week. I was pretty sick and I'm starting to feel a little better, so I thought I could make a video today. I actually had a really good reading month in August. I read, I think, 10 books. I really enjoyed the majority of them, and I can't wait to talk about them with you today. So let's get started. The first book I want to talk about is The Disinvited Guest by Carol Goodman, which I really enjoyed reading in August. I don't know if I would have enjoyed reading it the last 10 days because this book has to do with 3 different pandemics. So Carol Goodman is basically my favorite thriller writer. And in this book, we are following a group of friends and family. And Lucy's our narrator, and she is married to Reed, whose family owns this island off the coast of Maine. And there's another pandemic. So all these people have lived through the current pandemic. And now we're like 10-ish years in the future, and there's another one. And they've decided to go kind of ride out the worst of it on this island. This island was also a quarantine island for immigrants coming to the United States during the, I want to say, the typhus epidemic. So there's a lot of history on the island. Lucy, who's our narrator, got really, really sick during the 2020 pandemic and has lingering health issues. So she is very afraid of this current pandemic. There's a great mystery that has to do with the last pandemic and the typhus pandemic. And it's so creepy. You know, like how there are thrillers that are like a locked house, or you're like stuck in the woods and you can't get away. This has very much that feel because they're trapped on this island. They can technically get away for a little while because they do have a boat to do supply runs, but they can't really leave, especially Lucy, because she is very concerned that if she were to get sick again, this time she would die. I would rank this book as great, which is my second highest ranking, and I really enjoyed it. If you want a fun, creepy thriller this autumn, definitely pick it up. Okay, moving on from thrillers, I read quite a bit of fantasy this month. And the first one is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I don't know if this is actually considered fantasy, but I think it is. I mean, it's not really historical fiction, so we're just putting it in fantasy. I finally did it. I finally read it. I read The Song of Achilles, and you know what? It was great. I still like Circe better, but it was a fantastic read, and I did cry my face off for a long period of time, probably the last 70 pages of the book, plus 30 minutes afterwards. It's a beautiful, tragic love story between Achilles and Patroclus. And if you haven't read it somehow, but like mythology retellings, definitely read it. If you like tragic love stories, definitely read it. And if you like ancient Greece, definitely read it. The next fantasy I read was Dark Earth by Rebecca Scott. I had an arc for this. This is a historical fantasy, and I would put this at like a solid read. In Dark Earth, we follow a pair of sisters, and it's the Saxon time period in England or Britain or whatever. So it's about 500 AD. Rome has fallen. All the stuff that was Roman is now like ruins. And we have different groups with different belief systems. These 2 sisters, Blue and I can't remember her sister's name. It's driving me crazy. I want to say Isla, but I don't think it's Isla. They are the daughters of a blacksmith who can make these amazing swords. Some things happen with their father dying, and then they're not really safe. Here was the thing about this book. I went in with really high expectations because I love post-Roman Britain and like pre-medieval Britain. But this book fell short several ways. I thought the premise was cool. The setting was cool. But the action had a very weird rhythm. So anytime you felt like the story was like starting, the author would pull back. So that was kind of a weird, like you'd have this scene that you thought was going to be so exciting. And I remember on the midway point, I was like, okay, so this is the book starting really. But then it gets pulled back again. The action always got pulled back. There's also a very strange ending, which I won't give away, but it didn't like fit the rest of the tone of the book for me. Overall, when you tell me a book is like historical fantasy and it's gonna be set in 500 AD in Britain, I think it's gonna be like a favorite book. So to give this one a solid read, it really didn't live up to my expectations, but I still think it was an interesting book to read. Then I read Beneath the Sugar Sky by Seanan McGuire, which is the 3rd book in the Wayward Children series. And I thought this book was great. I listened to it on audio, and sometimes I really struggle with audiobooks because I'm one of those people that like when an audiobook's like, you have 14 hours to finish. I don't have a lot of time to read audiobooks, listen to them. I don't commute. When I walk or run, I usually listen to music. So that is like something that I have a hard time coming to terms with when it says I have to like spend 14 hours listening to something. These books are very short. So I think the total runtime was like 3 hours, 45 minutes. And it was perfect. I listened to it before I got COVID, and I listened to it while I got like my kids' bedrooms ready to go back to school. And it was really nice. I might continue to listen to this series because I thought it was a very fun read in the audio format. Something I really enjoy about this Wayward Children series is that their romantic relationships are not the forefront of the story. And I don't really like to read like teen romance. So I really enjoy this because there really isn't a romantic aspect. They all have their own lives going on, and it's not really dependent on their relationships with each other, which is very cool. The setting in this one is confection, which is like Candyland on crack, and I loved it. And I just started listening to the fourth one, but I think I need to restart it because I was listening to it when I had a fever, and I wasn't really paying attention very well. So in my September wrap-up, you're probably going to get book 4 on audio. I'm going to put this next book in fantasy, even though it's technically gothic fiction, but I read Small Angels by Lauren Owen, and it was my book of the month pick for August. And I hadn't read a gothic fiction in a really long time. Like, I feel like the last gothic fiction I read was probably something I read in like my Brit Lit classes in either high school or college. But this book takes place in rural England, I think. That's like what the feel is. And you are on the outskirts of this place called Mockbeggar Woods, and Small Angels is the name of the church. And you jump between different time periods with this story. So in the present day, you have a woman who's engaged to a man who grew up there and she wants to get married there. And then you have like 10-ish years ago with that man's sister and her relationship with a other teenage girl who has a connection with the woods. And then you jump back like 200 years earlier about a family that lived in Mockbeggar Woods. So you've got these different time periods. I will say for like a gothic fiction, I think because I haven't read gothic fiction in so long, I was expecting it to read more like a thriller, and it definitely didn't. So the beginning of the book is really slow. It really takes time to set everything up. I found myself way more interested in the like current day story than in either of the past stories because there was no like big reveal. You knew what happened in those past ones. So it didn't really feel as like interesting because the only place you didn't know what was going to happen was present. I liked the end a lot. It definitely engaged me once I was in like the last like 75 pages, like didn't want to put it down, but it took a while to get to that point. So because of that, I'm going to give this a rating of a solid read. I thought it was a good read, but it wasn't really like one of those reads that just like captured me and dragged me into it. Okay, in August, I read a classic. I've been doing such a bad job reading classics, but I actually finished My Antonia in August. I think I started it in June and then didn't read it at all in July, and then finished it in August. I give this a solid read. So here's the thing. I think I would have absolutely loved to have studied this book instead of like The Grapes of Wrath when I was in high school or in college. But in terms of just like a fun book to read, the beginning was fantastic and the end was great, but the middle is really slow. So I will say like the first probably 30% of this book was phenomenal. I thought the writing was gorgeous. You're watching children at that point who are growing up in Nebraska, and it's beautiful. The middle, it got a little bit slow, and I wasn't as interested in their lives. But then the end, you really got this like full circle feeling of the characters who you had known as children, and now you see them as adults. So I really liked the end also. This is definitely a book that I think that like if I had read it when I was 16, I would have said it was one of the best books I read all year when I was reading like only classics. But, you know, as an adult who reads a plethora of different genres and stuff like that now, I put it at solid read. Definitely something that would have been fun to go over with a class. Let's move on to romance. I read 4 romances in August, and the first one was The Duke Buys a Bride by Sophie Jordan, and this book was great. I really love Sophie Jordan. I have a book of hers almost every single one of my wrap-ups. I don't think I actually have one for September. Oh well. But this one, we follow Marcus, this is the 3rd book in the series, The Rogue Files. Yes, this is book 3 in The Rogue Files, and Marcus is the Duke from this series, and we've known him in the last 2 books. So in the first book, while the Duke was sleeping, he's the Duke that's, in a coma. And in the second one, his best friend hooks up with his stepmom, and he gets real angry, and he just goes, he's like, I'm going to Scotland. It's the middle of the winter. I'm just getting to Scotland. So this book opens up with him so drunk in a town, and they put him in a barn basically to sleep for the night. And he wakes up the next morning, and there's a bride auction going on. So Alice, our heroine, has been fake married sort of to her father's friend because she's an orphan. So he fake married her for X amount of years just kind of to get her to adulthood. And now he gets to auction her off as a wife. And her good friend who was supposed to come and buy her doesn't show up. And now she's like, oh my God, this horrible man is going to buy me and I'm going to have to be married to him. So Marcus wakes up and he's literally covered in horse shit and smells horrible and walks over and is like, you can't sell her. Oh my God, she's a human, and buys her with the plan that he's going to employ her as a housekeeper at his house in Scotland. But of course, that's not what happens. This is a lot of fun tropes. It's got the road trip trope because they're going from England to Scotland in the winter and the weather's terrible. It has the only one bed trope. It has obviously the marriage of convenience trope. It was a lot of fun. It was great. Definitely give it a try. Next, I read Hate Mates by Sam Crescent, and I got an ARC for it, so there's the cover. This book was okay. So this book was very short. It was definitely more novella length, which is fine. I love reading romance novellas. But it was so unbelievably forgettable that I think 2 days after I finished it, I was trying to remember what I had read recently, and I couldn't remember the characters' names, the titles, anything. It's kind of like a enemies to lovers story about 2 fated mates who know they're fated from childhood, so they fight it, and they're just kind of mean to each other in elementary school and high school. But then the fact that they're fighting their soulmate connection once they're older makes them lose their werewolf powers. I didn't really like it very much. I said it was okay because A, the sex was really good, and B, it wasn't really one of those books that I would say was not for me because I did read it very quickly, but I just didn't love it. It's book 17 or something in a series, and I looked through and this author has written over 100 books. So obviously there are a lot of people who do like it, but this one just wasn't one that really stuck with me. Next, I read Fearless at Heart by Zoe York, which I also had an ARC for. It's not a new release, but after the overturning of Roe v. Wade, Zoe York put it up for free on NetGalley because it is a book with a positive light abortion, which was handled so well in this book. Seth is our hero, and he lives not in the town, Pine Harbor. And then January is our heroine, and she does. So they both grew up in Pine Harbor, and when they were dating, when they were seniors in high school, January got pregnant, and they did decide to have an abortion. And then they went their separate ways. And they didn't really break up because of being mad at each other or anything. It was just kind of Seth joined the military, whatever. I can't remember what it is. They live in Canada, so it's flying. He can fly. So whatever the Air Force in Canada is called. And January went to college and became a teacher. And it's been 20 years, so they're in their late 30s now, and they rekindle. And it was really, really nice watching this late 30s relationship. Also, I'm in my late 30s, and obviously I've been married for a while, but I do kind of enjoy reading more mature romances because of that. The abortion plotline, which is the main reason I got it, was handled really, really well, and at no point do you feel like they made the wrong choice. They both lived really full lives, and they did end up getting back together, which is lovely. I would put this at a high, solid read. I'm not a huge contemporary romance reader, but I did enjoy this one, and I think that if you are someone who loves small town romance, definitely check out this whole series because I know there's a ton of books in it. Seth has a lot of siblings, and because it definitely has that small town feel when you're reading it. This one is summer in Canada. If you want summer vibes, it definitely had them. And lastly, I read Goddess of the Hunt by Tessa Dare. And this one was great. And this was an earlier Tessa Dare that I wasn't familiar with this series. So as you can tell, like the covers are a little different. I got bought at used, so it's got a bad sticker there. But this has a lot of really fun tropes in it. And surprisingly, this is like a total like autumn vibes Regency, which I don't think I've ever, I know I have because I've read It Happened One Autumn by Lisa Kleypas, but it was a long time ago. But I don't feel like there's like a ton of like autumn vibes Regencies, and this one definitely is. So the premise is that Lucy is like the younger sister that's always tagged along with her brother and his friends. And they have a very close-knit group of friends. So Lucy's older brother is Henry, and then he has his friends Toby and Jeremy. And Lucy's always been in love with Toby, and she found out that Toby's getting engaged. And she's heartbroken because she always thought she'd marry him. So she kind of just like attacks Jeremy one night and is like, you need to teach me how to like make out and how to be like a seductress because I need to seduce Toby. So while Lucy has been in love with Toby forever, Jeremy has always kind of had his eye on her, and now's his chance. It was super fun and a great Tessa Dare read, even if it felt a little different than like the Castles Ever After and the Duke Meets Girl or Girl Meets Duke series. I still really enjoyed it. I still think I'm going to read the rest in the series. That is my August wrap up. So I did do a pretty good job reading. I'm sorry it's so late. I'm sorry my voice is messed up. I hope you are having a wonderful beginning to your September. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you, thank you, thank you. Please do me a favor and throw me a green apple in the comments to let me know you've made it this far. As always, I hope you are in the middle of a good book, about to start reading a good book, or about to start writing a great book. See you soon.